Thank you. Everybody, please welcome the director of Sinners, Ryan Coogler. All right. All right.
Please don't. Man, thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. And thank you, Chris, for taking time out of your open schedule to.
It's all good. This is the important thing. Be here. Did you guys enjoy the movie? And how many of you had seen it before? Okay. Repeat business. We like that. And let's talk inspirations for a second. I mean, so when you sat down to write this, you were thinking, if I can just get the great Delroy Lindo to say, I shat myself. That's where this was all going, right?
That was a part of it for sure. No, it was definitely like, I knew I was stretching myself to do things that I hadn't done before, tones that I hadn't done before, things that I always appreciated in movies, but I hadn't had a chance to do myself. And I was actually excited about having actors do things that they weren't known for as well. And I think Delroy's brilliant performance was a big part of that. I had never seen him, play a character that was that tortured, but also that funny, which I think the blues is so many things, and his each one of these characters like was conceived as a representation of that. So yeah, it was a little bit of that, a little bit of getting Delroy some laugh out loud moments,
And just that clip that you end with, Miles Caton, he'd never picked up a guitar before this film.
No.
I mean, and did Ludwig teach him? Ludwig Göransson, composer?
A little bit, yeah. Like we casted Miles. He's a musical prodigy. Grew up as a child singer. His mom is a big time gospel singer. Comes from a musical family, but he grew up with playing the piano, and he had just finished high school when we shot this movie, and he was singing background for the artist Her. When Francine Maisler, our casting director, found him, and yeah, he had the guitar in the audition tape. He did a Sam Cooke song, and the lights it was very dimly lit audition tape, famously. So maybe he was trying to hide his fingers a little bit. And then we called him out for his callback, and I had Ludwig attend. Ludwig Göransson's our composer. We share him.
He's your composer. I just borrow him. And very generous of you. Thank you.
No, he's amazing, and Ludwig is a guitarist himself. Actually, his father was a Swedish blues guitarist, and that was how he got introduced to the instrument. Crazy enough, I found that out on this movie. I didn't know that. But yeah, Ludwig came to the callback and kind of sat there, and then he kind of came clean about the guitar when he saw Ludwig, but Mike and Ludwig and Francine, we were all very generous, and he immediately after getting the part. Got hooked up with a guitar teacher in Philadelphia. So he lives in New York City, and he would catch the train 3 times a week to Philly, and basically taught himself how to play slide blues guitar by the time we shot in about 2 months.
That's amazing, absolutely incredible. Let's talk genre a little bit, because it's a very effective horror movie, but it's so much more than that, and not in the sense that simply as bandy around about. People talk about defying genre, they talk about elevated horror, things like that. But what I see in the film is a lot of influences, I see a lot of love for the horror genre. I see references to The Shining and The Thing. But there's so much more to the film that feels very organic. It doesn't feel like an attempt to try and shift genre or break genre. It feels like an attempt to stand on the shoulders of horror movies that have come before and say something new with it.
No, absolutely. I mean, you very good at this, Chris. Too bad you really good at something else, but I think that you're absolutely right. Like blues music was subject to so much judgment, as a lot of things are in African American culture. So what I didn't want to do was judge the genres that I loved coming up. I think it's masterful films in horror, in the horror genre, and not just like the ones that brought up a couple of Kubrick films and Carpenter films, but I just love the stuff, and I wanted to be at home in it and not try to be better than the horror that came before, but really embrace it. And for us, I always look at like, it's a 24-hour movie, right? And over the course of a day, you can have like moments that feel like you in a romantic comedy. You know what I mean? You can have moments where you feel like you're in a thriller. You can have moments where you feel like you're in a horror movie. You know what I mean? Moments where you feel like you're in a comedy. And I definitely wanted to try to embrace just being true to what was happening. You know what I mean? A film.
Why 24 hours?
Yeah, I love 24-hour movies. Like I just love them, man. Like, and I think they really, they just have built-in stakes. And my first film, my first feature film was a 24-hour movie, Fruitvale Station. And I mean, and this for me was in many ways like a return back to that type of filmmaking, but at this scale. That was the last movie I shot on film. I was super seeing, and for this, I knew I was jumping in genres and scope, but it did feel nice to come back to that concept.
What brought you back to the path of righteousness in terms of film?
It was you, Sensei. No, honestly, it was, man. But I've been trying to get back. For I just had enough credits this time, and thankfully was at the right studio. I know Pam and Mike here somewhere. Yeah, I was at the right studio that embraced it. They still got a lot of your old equipment, which was nice, it was just the right timing, I would say.
Well, talk about autumn. I mean, shooting IMAX, shooting everything on large format, 5-perf, 65mm, 15-perf IMAX. It's an incredible combination, particularly with those wide lenses. What was her approach? She'd never used this format before, right?
No, she hadn't. Very few people have. But what was great about Autumn is she's very very brave and courageous. Like not in terms of just life. She's that too. But in terms of trying new things, and I think in terms of her exposure is very brave. But what was great was we shot, our first time working together was Wakanda Forever. But that was like a very complicated production.
When you say the name of a film, you have to wait a little bit so people can applaud.
Oh, I got you.
That's how.
I'm
and
ready.
you have to make it seem like you're not waiting. You just have to, take a sip or.
Copy that. Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. Boom. See, he always teaching me. You know what I mean? But we worked on that. That was our first time working together. But she had come highly recommended from Rachel Morrison, who I worked with on Fruitvale and the first Panther, and that ended up being like 100+ day shoot just because of the size of it, and we had some misfortune, weather and a cast injury. So we, when it came to day count, by the time we wrapped that movie, that was the DP I had worked with the most. Even though we only done one movie together. And so for this one, that was a digital movie. That was on a Sony Venice with Panavision anamorphic lenses, and in between our movies, she shot The Last Showgirl with Gia Coppola, and they shot that on Super 16 on the Arri 416. So she was just coming off of a film movie and had like kind of fallen back in love with it. So she was really excited, and then we got a call from one of the Warner execs because we were gonna shoot this movie on Super 16 at first. I figured it was gonna be like a grindhouse movie, like burns on the frames and scratched up. I hear Pam laughing, because of the twinning process, they said, "Yo, we gotta be 35 because of gate weave on the 416. We'll never be able to put both mics in the frame, so bumped up to 35. And I actually have never shot 35 before, so I was like, excited, nervous. And then we got a call from Jesse Ehrman over at Warner Brothers. He was like, "Yo, have you given any consideration to large format?" And I was fresh off being at your premiere, you know, in New York, watching Oppenheimer, and I was like, oh shit.
No, you have to pause after the name of the film. It's like you don't get it.
Let me run it back. I was fresh off of Lincoln Square, the world premiere of Oppenheimer. And you know, I just remember being just blown back by, you know, by those transitions to full 143. And like it was like a movie moment when he said, "Have you thought about Lawrence Furman?" And I just remember just being like, "Oh shit," you know. And I'm like, "Yes." So I hit Autumn up, and we immediately started testing. You know, the first thing we did was we went to Photochem and looked at some dailies. You know, and we looked at ultra Panavision, and 143 full frame. Some of your old dailies too. Looked at the Tenet trailer on film. Looked at Hateful Eight, which was the last thing to be shot with that format and those lenses, and I just fell in love again, like sitting in that screening room in the old BET. I felt like I was something I had been trying to chase since I was in film school. I had access to it again, and then we went out to Lancaster because we needed a flat horizon like the Mississippi Delta. Took an actor out there and we tested all of that photography. Went back to IMAX and played it, and I remember when it cut from the tested footage we shot with Ultra Panavision to that 143 full frame, it just kind of knocked me back. You know, the same way that some of those blues records can just knock the shit out of you. You know, so I knew that was it, and thankfully Warner Brothers cleared us, and we got to it.
Yeah. Well, she did an incredible job. You all did an incredible job with the photography and the creation of the world.
Oh, me and Zinzi called you and Emma though, didn't we? Yeah, me, Emma Thomas. Big pause. But we got on the phone with you guys and just asked all the large format questions we could ask. And I'm
pretty sure we said go with Super 16.
Nah,
easier.
Nah, y'all was like, go for it, man. Y'all gave us a lot of encouragement. Maybe held back a few things. You know what I'm saying? We found out later. But no, it was awesome.
Well, talk to us about the world building. How did you shoot? Talk about Hannah. Talk about production design. I'm assuming you built the joint, or you know.
Yeah, So the film is set in Clarksdale, Mississippi Delta. Very flat landscape. We shot it in Louisiana for crew and for tax credits, and we shot in all our stage work, which was just really the juke joint build, right, Zins? The juke and the stage. So the interior of the juke we built on a stage in the middle of New Orleans, and just about everything else we shot, you know, way outside of the city where we could find those flat horizons, really in a lot of sugar plantations. So we found the exterior juke joint location on a golf course that was like overgrown and abandoned, like alligators had moved in and shit. And Hannah Beekler, our production designer, is from New Orleans. Well, she's actually from Ohio, but she's been living in New Orleans like 20 years. And she would be like, "All right, Ryan, so we out here. Just imagine the juke joint right here, you know, and like it's literally like snakes and like alligators and shit, mosquitoes, you know. And Autumn's out there saying, "No, Hannah, a little bit to the left," because she's looking at the sun. That's gonna give us the most amount of ability to shoot. And in the script I had the baptism scene, so I needed water close by. And I've been working with Hannah since Fruitville, so it's been 13 years. She's incredible with research. And kind of when I was, you know, working on the script, it was like, you know, I knew that I wanted the juke joint to be in a mill, but I didn't know if it would be a sugar mill, you know, a lumber mill, you know, like we didn't know. And she just hit the ground running on the research of Mississippi about where it would be at the time, and then she was like, "Yo, it's for sure a lumber mill." And they went out of business in 1920 so and so. You know what I mean? It had been abandoned for this much time, and so, you know, she's a true genius. You know, and she was able to build the church as well, and Annie's shack as well, where we find Annie around all those oak trees. You know, we just found those locations, made sure the lighting was right, and then she drew the places up, and we built them.
Wow, it's beautiful, beautiful work. Talk a little bit about your collaboration with Michael B. Jordan, incredible actor. Amazing performances. Never better than you saw that pause, right?
I did.
Never,
I'm watching.
never better than in this film. I mean, he's incredible, and I don't know whether you and he talked about the way in which actors have tried to portray twins in the past, but you have to go back to Jeremy Irons, Dead Ringers, something like that, to see, and it feels to me like there's something to the idea that he's not playing the differences between the twins. He's playing the similarities. He's playing the internal.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful performance. And Mike is such an interesting actor in that he makes really difficult things look easy. Like similar to Miles never playing the guitar. Mike had never boxed before. Didn't know where to start. But in a matter of months, kind of transformed his body, gained 30 pounds of muscle, and confused the audience into thinking he was a real, a natural born talent to box. And for this, all of the work was really internal. And we did talk about that. We had twin consultants on the film, filmmakers named Noah and Logan Miller, that I kind of came up with, and they are completely identical. They go everywhere together for a long time. They share one phone, and that was kind of the what I was after with these two guys, because what I find with Noah and Logan is when you're around them, it's very hard to tell them apart. But when you get them in isolation, you know what I mean, the differences start to come out. And that kind of fascinated me. That's kind of how we came up with these guys and the structure. But you're absolutely right, because a lot of times identical twins that spend that much time together, they are a lot alike. You know what I mean? Like they have subtle differences that kind of become big differences if you know them. You know what I mean? But in truth, they siblings that are as close as siblings could be. In some ways, they're like duplicates of each other. So it was a lot of intricate work he did, man. And I'm so proud of him.
Well, and when you see the film again, a lot of people here are seeing it for the second time, multiple times. I watched it again this weekend, and every time you see it, you see more and more the ways he's a different person in each character, and there's a lot of stuff you miss the first time around. Why in the writing process, and it's a brilliant script, but what drew you to the idea of twins? I mean, they could have just been brothers, they could have been friends. How did you settle on twins? Because obviously you must have known as a director, as you're writing, you're making your life very difficult.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, well, I actually have a phobia of doppelgangers. So it's something that I always like Jordan Peele's movie Us was like a very difficult watch for me. But I also have a lot of identical twins in my life. Like my mom has older sisters that are identical, Merlin and Curlin, and I'm totally fine with identical twins as long as I know
you just don't want your own.
Exactly. And so it was and the thing was with this movie, when I was kind of studying the Delta blues, the blues kind of exists in a twin relationship with the church. Those the idea of the juke joint in the church, they kind of like identical twins, so to speak. Like one is dealing with the carnal, the other one is dealing with the spiritual. But truly, blues musicians will tell you that the blues is dealing with spiritual and carnal. You know what I mean? Yeah. Whereas the church is maybe like keeping the carnal out. But
I think that the attitude towards sensuality of the film is very important. We talked a little bit about horror movies and your respect for horror movies, but one of the really striking things about this film is it verts all of those tropes in a very fundamental way, particularly when it comes to sexuality, because horror movies traditionally, characters are punished for their sexuality almost by rote. Yeah. Particularly the horror movies I grew up with in the 70s and 80s. Yeah. That was very much a feature of this kind of moralistic underpinnings of them. And in this film, sin itself never seems so wholesome and virtuous. Like there's something really worthy and wonderful about all the sinning that goes on. And it feels like that must have been, to some extent, a conscious inversion on your part.
Absolutely. Yeah. No doubt about it, man. Like I was trying to capture, like, I mean, the blues is just it's an affirmation of humanity from a people who were denied it systemically, if that makes sense. it dealt with all of us. You know what I mean? Like it dealt with the clean and the dirty. You know what I mean? And that idea of judgment was something that I was thinking a lot about. Specifically when I would research the lives of these great musicians, and I would find out that a lot of them, like Miles, came from families that were church families, you know, and they were judged for their lifestyle, judged for the music that they made, judged for who they hung out with, and that concept of judgment. Even though I didn't have a title for Sinners, you know what I mean, it was always there, and I wanted to subvert it. I also just wanted to make a sexy movie, you know what I mean? Like I hadn't had that opportunity, and I was really excited about that. And you can't make a movie about the blues and it not be sexy, you know. Or well, vampires. Vampires pretty sexy too.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, but it's all it's all very much within the context of like the humanism in the film and the basic sympathy.
Yes.
For these characters. There's nothing misanthropic in this film, which is very unusual for a horror film. That's why it's not a horror film. It's just a great movie.
Oh, thank you, Chris.
The thing about that is that's so striking to me is the further inversion of tropes. Because I'm a big fan of Alan Parker's Angel Heart.
Oh, I love it.
Great film.
Yeah.
But
I watched it on your secondhand recommendation.
Oh, okay.
Because you showed it to Ludwig and Serena.
Well,
and they raved about it. I went and watched it.
And Alan Parker, huge craftsman, wonderful ear for music. It's a wonderful film in a lot of ways, but it deals in very stereotypical tropes of voodoo, of what constitutes the darkness of the human soul, how it's expressed in anthropological terms. And then when I saw your film, and it's the Irish doing the little river dance, which has never been shilling, it really is. It's the most spectacular musical inversion since, Kubrick made Singing in the Rain, the stuff of Nightmares.
Stop that.
No, but it's truly, it's like, why, who would ever think, I mean, the Irish, what did we ever do to you, is what I'm thinking. But even within that context, I want you to talk about the Irish and why Irish music, but I think, Jack O'Connell, I think there's such understanding and sympathy of the villains as well, and that makes it just such a rich experience. But talk about Irish music a bit.
Well, my name is Ryan, first of all. My baby brother's name is Keaton. So I'm a black dude with an Irish first name, right? You start there. But no, like truthfully, when telling the story of the Delta Blues, there was a lot of people there. It wasn't just African Americans there. It was the Choctaw people were there. You had white folks, but specifically white folks that were of Irish and Scottish descent. Like those were the folks who were exchanging musical ideas. And for me, this concept of being forcibly displaced, kind of having your culture demonized, working on land that you don't own, like all of these concepts, they're not unique to any particular part of the world, and there was a reason that Irish folks and black folks were exchanging ideas musically, and so for me, it was very clear that the character who would be the antagonist in the film had to have a complex understanding of this dynamic, and know that it was happening. Versions of it was happening. In other parts of the world, and a version of it had happened to him at one point. So that he could kind of speak to a deal with some level of sincerity, some level of truth, if that makes sense. And I do think that any music that nourished people through oppression, I think it has like a similarities that you feel, when you hear it. So I was always drawn to Irish folk music, I always have been, and I was really excited about this. The other thing I gotta say is, I started writing this script because of the loss of my uncle, who died 10 years ago. First person that introduced me to blues music. And Jack O'Connell, whose father died when he was relatively young. His father was an Irish immigrant to the UK, and all of these songs were songs that all the remix songs, Wild Mountain Time, Go Lassie Go, Rocky Road to Dublin. Those were songs that he listened to with his dad. Wow. You know, the Irish accent that he puts on during the baptism scene when he's saying the Lord's Prayer, that's his father's Irish accent. So you know, we were all kind of bringing our own grief for loved ones, like to these characters, like him included, which I think was why the you know he could be so endearing as an antagonist.
Mm. Well, it's a fantastic combination. We'll have to wrap up fairly soon, but I have to ask about the sequence in which, you know, the veil is pierced and musical history comes to life. That's a very bold swing in any movie, particularly in a movie that's first and foremost an entertainment. The tone shifts in a really fascinating but very controlled way. How did you approach that? How did you conceive of that? And why did anybody let you do that?
I'll answer the question backwards. So like, it was, you know, we were making a movie at Warner Brothers, and Pam and Mike. I've known Pam for a long time. Known Mike for a good chunk of time. But DeLuca is the type of guy who watches the first cut of the movie and says, "Hey yo, can you make the eyes glow more like Angel Heart?" You know what I mean? That was the first thing he said to me after watching the first cut. So I think they were encouraging bravery. You know what I mean? They were interested in doing things that felt against the grain in a big way. But the concept came from literally, bro. Like I grew up loving my Uncle James. I would go to his house and just sit and just watch him. I used to like looking at how old his hands were. I shit you not. Like he would sit down and be listening to blues music, and I would sit right here and just kind of look at like all the veins and shit in his hands and all the wrinkles. You know what I mean? While he would drink Old Taylor whiskey. Love this man to death. Had no opinion on blues music. It did not feel like it was for me at that time. You know, and it was on at his house constantly. But when he died, you know, I missed him so much. I'll find myself playing those old records again, you know, just to remind myself of him. And I would literally like close my eyes, you know, and listen to these records, and I would feel like he was right there with me. You know what I mean? So that activity was kind of constantly on my mind. And by the time I got halfway through the script, I had outlined it and researched it and everything. And I was up in Northern California in a hotel on my own. And I realized I had fallen in love with all these characters. You know what I mean? I didn't want to kill them, you know, even though that was what the movie was. And I was like, shit, man, like, wouldn't it be cool if I could give them like a victory moment, like at the midpoint, if it's going to be a tragedy, you know what I mean? And what better victory would it be to kind of let them dance with, you know, their grandchildren and their ancestors, even though they don't know that's what they're doing. You know what I mean? Like wouldn't that be cool to see it cinematically? So that was where the idea came from.
Wow. Fantastic work. Got a couple more minutes. Talk to me about how you did approach the music for this. I mean, we've talked about genre in terms of horror, but did you view this film as a musical? Did you connect with Ludwig very early on with this? I mean, how did that go?
I did view it as a musical, personally, like and I'm a frustrated musician, you know, like I wish I could make music. I got a brother who's a musician. I'm so jealous of him. But no, like me and Ludwig met in graduate school in 2008. I didn't know anything about film composing. I asked him if he played multiple instruments. He fucking lied to me and said he only played guitar. You know that's not the case. Yeah, but no, like I always wanted to make a guitar movie with him. You know, that was always a dream of mine to make something that was just like balls to the walls music. Yeah. You know, and you know, I didn't have this idea for this movie, but it was always a desire. And I also loved Inside Llewyn Davis, the Coen Brothers movie. Yeah. I loved, you know, I saw that movie in Cannes. I loved how it made me feel. You know, like when the characters would sing and it wasn't a musical just because the characters were actually musicians. You know what I mean? Like I was like, man, one day I'd be cool to make a movie like that. You know, that feeling. And yeah, like, so for me, it always was like a stealth musical. You know, like it's not a musical on the surface, but the characters, you know, live for music. You know, and every once in a while they play.
Well, and unlike most musicals, in not being officially a musical, being a stealth musical, as you say, it's actually able to comment on music a lot, comment on the importance of music and how we use music and what it means to people in different situations.
No, absolutely, man. Like I think that music is arguably like the most utilitarian art form. Like I would say next to the culinary arts, you know. Um and like, you know, you have to eat. You know what I mean? You won't survive without eating. The music is you know, technically optional. uh, but and you know, for me, these characters, you know, and I think how the Delta Blues was born because this was all they had. You know, like these Friday and Saturday nights, you know, for a few hours they get together, and remind themselves that they're human beings. You know what I mean? They're not cattle. They're not 3/5 of a man. You know what I mean? Like they full blown people, even if their society wasn't recognizing that. And
Talk
music
to me
can
a
make
little
you
bit.
feel alive.
I just want to ask about the money in the film.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I read a couple books. I read a lot of books for the movie, but two really stuck with me. One is Blues People by Leroy Jones, who later changed his name to Amiri Baraka. And oh, word, y'all know, great. The other one is Deep Blues by a journalist named Robert Palmer, and both of them talk about like the economy of sharecropping, you know, and how these plantations were you know, basically their own countries. You know, that's how much they dominated everybody's lives, and some of them were so massive and powerful that they were printing their own currency. You know, especially at this time during the Depression, and that's where you get Charlie Patton. You know, he they say he kind of invented what would become the Delta Blues on Dockery Plantation, and the Dockery Plantation is one of the most proliferated currencies that you'll find in the museums down there. You know, and we actually had a chance to visit Dockery with Ludwig and his dad. You know, it was his dad's lifelong dream to go on the blues trail. And it was crazy to be there at what was a slave plantation. You know, with these two Swedes, you know, who dedicated their lives to the art form of music. You know what I mean? Yeah. You know, Ludwig, you know, his wife Serena, who was our executive music producer, they live for music. You know what I mean? And to be there with them, I really recognize like the power of what these people were able to create. Like it changed, you know, it literally changed popular culture globally. You know, and that is, you know, that is, you can't tell that story, you know, without telling the story of the economy. You know what I mean? That you know, kept these people in a type of bondage.
Well, and I mean, speaking of the power of culture and pop culture, I think the movie is incredible. I think the things you're talking about are things that, had you made a documentary, a few 100,000 people might have come to it. There's so many things in this film I didn't know that I found just from watching your art and what you've brought to it. So I thank you for that. And thank you for being here to talk to all of us.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much.